He stood in the corner of the conference room, the same one where he'd once led every major presentation. But this time, he wasn't at the table. He wasn't even invited. The new intern was. A kid barely out of college, standing at the front, nervously clicking through a PowerPoint. His PowerPoint. Daniel recognized every slide, every graph, every late night that built it. And now, it had someone else's name on it. Across the table, his boss smiled proudly, acting as if this was all part of some grand mentorship. Fresh minds bring fresh perspectives, the boss joked as laughter filled the room. Daniel smiled too, but it wasn't joy. It was that sharp, quiet smile people wear when they finally realize what game they've been playing all along. That was the day he decided to walk away. No shouting, no email war, no goodbye speech, just a short message. Thank you for the lessons. The next morning, his desk was empty. The intern had his seat, and the company had no idea what it had just lost. But to understand that moment, the quiet exit that started an unexpected collapse, you need to know who Daniel Reed really was. He wasn't born into privilege. He didn't have connections or fancy degrees. What he did have was grit. The kind that grows in people who've been told, "You're not enough," one too many times. He worked his way up from a junior analyst to the man behind the company's biggest innovations. Every success they celebrated had his fingerprints on it. But credit, that always stopped just short of his name. Still, Daniel believed loyalty would pay off. He stayed late, trained others, built what others only dreamed of, until loyalty turned into exploitation and mentorship turned into theft. So, when his project was handed to a rookie for show, it wasn't just a betrayal. It was the universe testing him. And this time, Daniel wasn't going to fail, because sometimes walking away isn't losing. It's leveling up. And the story of how one man's silence shook an entire company begins right here. Welcome, story lovers! From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Daniel Reed wasn't born into success. He grew up in a small Midwestern town where opportunity was something you had to chase, not something that came to your door. His father worked the night shift at a factory that made machine parts, and his mother ran a tiny sewing shop out of their living room. Money was always short, but pride, that they had plenty of. His parents didn't talk about wealth or luxury. They talked about earning your worth, even when no one was watching. Do good work, son, his father used to say, even if no one claps. Daniel took that advice to heart. Maybe too much. He was a bright kid, quiet, observant, with a mind that loved patterns, the kind that sees connections where others see confusion. In high school, he built a small coding project that won a state-level science fair. For a moment, he believed that life was about to open up. Scholarships, college, a clean path to his dream of becoming a software architect. But life, as he learned early, doesn't always reward potential. A few months before graduation, his father lost his job when the factory shut down. The family's savings evaporated faster than anyone expected. College became a maybe next year dream. Then, maybe someday. Then, maybe never. Instead of lecture halls and dorm rooms, Daniel found himself behind the counter of a hardware store, stacking boxes and fixing computers in the back office. At night, he'd watch online tutorials on programming, sometimes on borrowed Wi-Fi from the cafe across the street. He couldn't afford the textbooks, so he'd screenshot free resources, saving them on a cheap second-hand laptop with a broken E-key. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival, the quiet kind that doesn't get applause. A few years later, he landed an entry-level IT job at a local firm. No benefits, no growth path, just a paycheck. But it was enough to keep the lights on and to keep believing. He'd arrive early, leave late, volunteer for extra work. Not for the praise, but for the learning. People noticed his discipline. They just didn't reward it. Promotions skipped over him. His ideas were used without credit. When his code fixed a major system error that saved the company thousands, someone else got the Employee of the Month plaque. He laughed it off, the way quiet people do when they're too tired to fight. But inside, something was shifting. The belief that hard work alone guarantees success was starting to crack. At home, Daniel's life wasn't much different. He lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and a flickering kitchen light he never had time to fix. His mother had grown older and weaker, her health slowly fading after years of labor and stress. Every spare dollar he made went to her medications, doctor visits, and keeping the old house standing. He never complained. He'd just tell her, "I'm getting closer, Mom. One day, I'll make something that matters." And she'd smile. That soft, tired smile of mothers who believe even when logic says not to. That promise became his anchor. Then came the break, or at least what looked like one. A tech startup from the city noticed his online portfolio and invited him for an interview. He remembered standing outside their glass building, heart pounding, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and shoes that pinched. He got the job. Finally. It wasn't a glamorous title, Junior Data Analyst, but it was the start of something real. He threw himself into the work, like a man trying to outrun every disappointment that came before. He stayed up nights rewriting systems, improving analytics, and creating tools that even his managers didn't understand fully. He didn't just work in the company. He helped build it from the inside out, and slowly, quietly, the company grew. But success, Daniel would later realize, comes with shadows. The better he got, the more invisible he became. Ideas that once brought applause now got reviewed by upper management and released under someone else's name. Still, he stayed because he wasn't driven by ego. He was driven by belief. He thought loyalty meant legacy. That staying humble meant being noticed for the right reasons. Until that belief broke, the day everything he had built was taken from him. It started small. His manager asked him to train a new intern named Jake, a bright, confident kid from a big university. Daniel didn't mind. He liked mentoring. He saw a bit of his younger self in Jake. Ambitious, eager to learn, slightly naive. For weeks they worked side by side. Daniel explained systems, processes, the logic behind every number. Jake took notes. And then one morning, Daniel walked into a meeting and saw something that froze him. Jake was presenting Daniel's entire project. Graphs, algorithms, designs. Under his own name, the boss sat at the head of the table, nodding proudly, saying, "That's exactly the kind of innovation we need from young talent." Daniel said nothing. He just stood there, invisible in the room he helped build. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just felt empty. Years of effort had been reduced to a footnote in someone else's career. His name wouldn't appear on any report. His credit erased. His faith broken. He thought about quitting that night. Not just the job, but the dream entirely. But then, he looked at an old photograph on his desk, his mother, smiling with a hand on his shoulder, and below it, a sticky note he'd written years ago. Make something that lasts. So he made a decision. He wasn't going to fight them. He was going to outgrow them. Because real revenge isn't screaming in the boardroom. It's succeeding in silence. And that's where his story truly begins. Daniel didn't quit right away. He showed up the next morning like nothing happened, smiled, nodded, logged in. That's what survivors do. They pretend until the pretending stops hurting. But something inside him had changed. The light in his eyes was colder now. He was done proving himself to people who didn't want to see. The intern, Jake, was being celebrated like the company's golden child. Articles were drafted, a press release was planned, and Daniel was told to help refine the model, the same one he'd already perfected. It was like being asked to polish the trophy someone stole from your shelf. Still, Daniel didn't lash out. He just observed, quietly, carefully, because in silence, he'd always found clarity. That week, the company's founder, Mr. Caldwell, a man with more charisma than conscience, announced a major expansion. They were pitching Daniel's project to a massive investor group. Jake would lead the presentation. Daniel would provide technical support from the back. It was the final insult. Watching your creation paraded as someone else's genius. But it was also the moment that shifted everything. The night before the investor meeting, Daniel stayed late to finalize the presentation files. Jake had already left after posting a celebratory photo captioned, "Big day tomorrow, dream coming true." Daniel opened the final version of the software and froze. Something was wrong. The core algorithm, the heart of the model, was broken. A data string had been altered, not accidentally, but deliberately. It produced clean graphs for short-term presentations, but would fail catastrophically in real-world application. If they used this version in production, the company's analytics system would crash, possibly taking client data with it. Daniel checked the changelog. It wasn't Jake. It was Caldwell himself. He'd modified Daniel's original model weeks earlier, simplifying it to make results look more market-friendly. The truth was, Caldwell had promised numbers that weren't real, and Daniel's system, in its true form, wouldn't have backed that illusion. For the first time, Daniel saw the full picture. The theft wasn't just personal, it was corporate. The boss didn't just take his work, he corrupted it. That realization hit like a lightning strike. He had built something honest, and they turned it into a lie. He sat back in his chair, staring at the glowing screen, heart pounding. For a long moment, he considered doing nothing. Why should he save them? Why protect people who used him? But his mother's words echoed in his head. Do good work, even if no one claps. He couldn't let innocent clients pay for Caldwell's greed. So, quietly, methodically, Daniel copied his original, unedited version onto an encrypted drive. Then he wiped traces of it from the company servers. It was the first quiet step toward his freedom and their downfall. The next morning, the big investor presentation began. The boardroom was buzzing with energy. Jake started strong. Confident voice, perfect slides, proud grin. Everything was going smoothly until halfway through the demo. Then, chaos. The graphs froze. The software crashed. Error messages flooded the screen. Investors exchanged nervous looks. Jake stuttered, desperately clicking. Caldwell's face turned pale. Daniel, sitting silently at the back, didn't move. He knew exactly why it happened. Because the company had tried to sell a version of his work that wasn't real. The meeting ended in disaster. Investors pulled their offers. Caldwell, red-faced and furious, demanded answers. Jake blamed a bug. Caldwell blamed technical mishandling. No one mentioned Daniel, the man who could have fixed everything. By the afternoon, the office was in full panic. Caldwell called Daniel into his office. "Reed," he said, forcing a smile. "You're the only one who can stabilize this. We need you." Daniel looked him in the eye, calm as ice. "I already did," he said, "months ago. You just broke it." Caldwell didn't respond. He couldn't. That was the moment Daniel knew. It was time to leave. He resigned that evening. No drama, no explanations, just a final message. Integrity isn't a liability. He packed his few belongings. A notebook, an old coffee mug, and the drive containing his original code. and walked out without looking back. Outside, the night air felt different. For the first time in years, he wasn't an employee. He was a free man, scared, uncertain, but free. Over the next few weeks, Daniel tried to move on. He applied to a few companies, did small freelance projects, but nothing clicked. He felt lost, like his skills were trapped between bitterness and burnout. Then, by chance, an email landed in his inbox. It was from Nora Patel, a tech journalist he'd met briefly at a conference years ago. She'd remembered his old analytics demo and was curious if he ever built a working version. Daniel hesitated. Then he sent her his original design, the one he'd rescued from the company servers. Within days, she wrote back, "Daniel, this is revolutionary. This could change data forecasting across industries. Have you ever thought about launching it yourself?" That email was the spark. Starting a company wasn't part of the plan. He had no investors, no team, no roadmap, just his code, his conviction, and a quiet kind of anger that powered him more than caffeine ever could. He rented a small workspace above an old bookstore downtown. He named his project True Sync Analytics. Because truth, he decided, was his brand. The first few months were brutal. Bills piled up. Investors ignored him. He lived on instant noodles and optimism. But every night, as he worked alone under the hum of old fluorescent lights, he felt something new, purpose. He wasn't fixing someone else's vision anymore. He was finally building his own. Meanwhile, back at Caldwell Analytics, things weren't going so well. Investors were leaving. Clients were questioning the integrity of their reports. And the intern, Jake, was drowning. He wasn't the villain. He was just a pawn who realized too late that he'd been used too. He reached out to Daniel one night. "I didn't know," Jake said. "They told me it was all mine. I'm sorry." Daniel forgave him because revenge wasn't about hate. It was about balance. Every story of betrayal has a turning point. The moment when pain stops being a wound and becomes fuel. For Daniel, that moment had arrived. The world had taken his project once. Now he was about to build something they couldn't take. And this time, when success came, it would come on his own terms. The day of the board meeting was supposed to be routine. Reports, projections, and polite lies dressed as numbers. But not today, not after what Mia had uncovered. The same intern who had stolen her project, the one her boss praised as brilliant, had presented her months of work as his own, and the company had built an entire new deal around it. What they didn't know was that Mia had quietly backed up everything. The drafts, the timestamps, even the voice notes where her boss had discussed the project with her in private. Now, as she walked into the sleek glass meeting room, every step echoed like thunder. This meeting is for executives only," said her boss, smirking. "Maybe check with HR before barging in again." But Mia didn't move. She placed a silver flash drive on the table. "That's funny," she said calmly, "because without me, you wouldn't have a meeting." A few heads turned. The intern's face went pale. The CEO frowned. "What's this about?" Mia clicked a button on the projector. Her presentation lit up the screen. The real one, with her name on every slide. "This is the project you called your own," she said, looking straight at her boss. "Every file, every draft, every bit of code came from my laptop." Gasps filled the room. Then came the second file, a recording. Her boss's voice played aloud. "Don't worry, kid. She's quitting soon. We'll just put your name on it. No one checks credits anyway." The CEO's expression hardened instantly. "Is that your voice?" he asked. Silence. The boss swallowed hard, his arrogance melting. Mia's voice trembled, but only slightly. "You built this company on stealing from people who actually cared. But today, I'm done being quiet." The intern tried to speak, but the CEO slammed his hand on the table. "Enough, get out." Both of you, Mia gathered her things. As she walked out, she could hear whispers. Admiration, shock, disbelief. Her boss sat frozen, his empire of deceit crumbling right before him. When she reached the lobby, the HR head ran after her. "Mia, please, can we talk?" But she only smiled. "You should have talked before." By sunset, the news had spread. The company's biggest client pulled out. The board suspended the CEO, and the intern deleted from the team page before the day ended. That night, Mia uploaded her own portfolio online. Within a week, she received 3 job offers from companies that actually valued honesty and talent. The woman they had dismissed as replaceable had become the reason their empire fell, and somewhere, deep down, she knew this wasn't revenge. It was justice. Dear viewers, if you've ever been underestimated, remember, silence can be powerful until it's time to speak. Mia didn't look back after that day. The company that had once drained her spirit collapsed under the weight of its own lies. Within months, headlines painted the story of a downfall that started with one brave woman's voice. But for Mia, the victory wasn't about revenge. It was about finally reclaiming the dignity she'd buried. Under years of silent endurance, the offers came pouring in. Emails from startups, established firms, even global corporations. But she didn't rush. For the first time, she wanted to build something that felt right, something honest. So she started small, a consulting agency dedicated to protecting employee rights and ethical innovation. She named it the Phoenix Group, after the mythic bird that rises from ashes, reborn stronger than before. At first, it was just her and an old laptop in a rented co-working space. But word spread fast. Her story became a symbol, shared across LinkedIn posts, podcasts, and office circles. People wanted to learn from the woman who dared to stand up when it mattered. 6 months later, she was mentoring young professionals, especially women, teaching them not only how to protect their work, but also how to believe in it. When someone would say, "But what if they steal my idea?" Mia would smile softly and reply, "Then make sure they can never steal your spirit." Her old boss. Last she heard, he was facing a fraud investigation. The intern had disappeared from the industry entirely, and the company, once a rising star in the corporate world, was now a cautionary tale in business schools. Mia's new life looked nothing like the one she'd left behind. Back then, she'd spent sleepless nights double-checking data that others took credit for. Now, she woke up to emails from clients, thanking her for saving their projects from collapse. One afternoon, as she walked through her sunlit office, filled with laughter and creativity, she paused at the glass door that read, "Maya Reyes, founder and ethics consultant." For a moment, her eyes stung with tears, not of sadness, but of peace. She remembered that younger version of herself, tired, overlooked, constantly told she wasn't management material. And she wished she could whisper to that woman, "Hold on, they can't erase what's meant for you." Mia now visited universities, sharing her story with students. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told them about betrayal, humiliation, and the cost of standing up for the truth. But she also told them about the power of resilience and the strange, poetic justice that follows integrity. Her parents, who had once worried about her leaving her job, now watched her interviews with pride. "You always had that fire," her father told her once. It just needed a reason to burn. As the years passed, Mia's company grew beyond what she had ever imagined. She hired former interns, single mothers, and dreamers who just needed someone to believe in them. And when they succeeded, she felt something deeper than joy. She felt healing, because in helping others reclaim their worth, she had reclaimed her own. Now, when people introduce her at conferences, they often mention how she exposed corruption, or how her decision reshaped corporate accountability. But Mia always corrects them gently. No, I just stopped letting fear make my choices. On quiet evenings, she sometimes visits the cafe near her old office, the place where she once sat, wondering if quitting had been a mistake. Now, she sips her coffee with a calm smile, watching young professionals rushing by with laptops and deadlines. She knows their world, the ambition, the exhaustion, the invisible battles, and in her heart, she whispers a small prayer for them. May you never let someone else take credit for your light. Her story had come full circle, from being the forgotten employee in a corner cubicle to becoming the woman whose courage built something far more lasting than any company, legacy. And as her story spread, it wasn't just hers anymore. It became every underpaid worker's anthem, every silenced voice's hope, a quiet reminder that sometimes walking away isn't losing. It's how you finally win. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more stories of courage, justice, and second chances.